Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Kuf Lamed Hey 135 in Bava Basra. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. We are, yesterday we ended with the story of Abaye questioning a ruling by Rava that a wife was free to marry whomever she wanted when her husband said on his deathbed that he had divorced her. He didn't technically say that. He said that she was permitted to even a Kohen Gadol. Obviously, we talked about how there were various languages, various alternative reads to that. But the bottom line is the implication was that he had divorced her because we knew that he had no children and he had brothers, and so as a result, otherwise she would have been obligated in chalitza or yibum, and so as a result, Abaye and Rava said, "Oh no, because we believe a husband to say that he divorced his wife because he could divorce her, so therefore we should have believed this man and we should allow this woman to marry whomever she wants." And Abaye said, "One second, we had two versions of the statements in Rabbi Yochanan's name. One was from Rabbi Yitzchak, who said that, or one was." From Rabbi Chia, who said the husband is believed, but we also had Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef, who said that the husband is not believed. Now, Rava responded, "Yes, but didn't we distinguish in one case, say that one is talking about retroactively, and that's where the husband is not believed, and only in the future is the when it comes to the future would we believe the husband?" But Abaye pointed out, is that answer really accepted by everybody? Do we have a tradition of that answer? Do we say that that's for sure the right answer? And then Rava said, "You know what? You're right, Abaye, and therefore we do need to be worried about the status of this woman." And indeed, Rashbam ended the Rashbam yesterday by saying that we learned from here, Mahaka Shaminan Debal Sha'amar Gerashti as Ishti, that a husband who says that I divorced my wife, Eino Naman, is not in fact believed. So that was where we ended. Now we're going to have another story that, as we pick up with the ninth line of Kuf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, another story involving Abaye questioning a ruling. And this time the ruling was by Rav Yosef, his teacher.
What happens? I'm thinking about a question yesterday afterwards. I was thinking a
Mhm.
question here. If we do say, or in the case that the Gerushin is accepted, maybe not in this case, but if he were, and we had witnesses and so forth, and the Gerushin, then and he's so then she is would be pater from Yibum.
Correct.
Right. So, however, suppose he gave his wife, she can't inherit him officially, but he gave her matanot. Once he's divorced, he divorced her in the last minute or whatever, the last hour or so. Will she still be entitled to receive the matanot, or would those be canceled as well?
You know, that's actually a very interesting question. It will depend on how those matano were given. Um, but most likely, the way that they would be given would be a manner that would be that she would have already received it and made a kinyan. So therefore, presumably, she would be allowed to keep those objects. But that will actually turn on some of the things that we'll be talking about today. So you're as is often the case, the questions that you ask are touched on, by the following Gemara. So you've got the right kind of your antennas are moving in the right direction. So let's take a look, and we'll say again. The first we got to get this a second Abaye case again, end of the ninth line. But then we'll get to questions that will address, I think, to some degree, your question. Hahuda have a muksaklan. So again, there was a certain person about whom we had an understanding, delay slay ache, that he had no brothers. Amr b'shas misa, and he said at the time of his death, delay slay ache, and he said that he didn't have brothers. Well, Amr of Yosef, my leichush, well, what do we have to be worried about? There isn't any. We don't think that he has brothers. We have no chazaka of him having brothers. In fact, we have a chazaka that he does not have brothers, and he says he doesn't have brothers. So chada de muchsak lan, because look, we have a chazaka delay sleachin that he doesn't have brothers. Va'od ha'amar b'shas mizu delay slay, and he's even told us at the time of his death that he didn't have brothers. So of course, this woman, even though the man died without any children, this woman should have be able to marry whomever she wants and have no obligation of yibum or chalitza. So Amrle Abaye said to Rav Yosef, 1 second, Amre, the people are saying the Ika Edim b'Medina Sayam that there are witnesses overseas, the Yade de Isleache that know that he does have a brother. Meaning the point is that there are rumors. It's not enough to undo the chazaka, maybe, but there are rumors that we need to be worried about it. So
No,
Hashta
wait,
Mias.
is that the case? If he doesn't have brothers, then there's no Yibam. We learned from Yehuda and Tamar, and this is Ramban has a long discussion of it, that was Yibum. He didn't have, there were no more brothers, right? So Yehuda married Tamar on
No, 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 no. First of all, 1 second, 1 second. First of all, there was another brother, right? The youngest brother, the youngest of the three
right,
brothers.
but he wasn't. But Yehuda
So
did marry her
so
through Yibum. They married her
but
through Yibum. The Ramban
yeah,
goes through
I mean,
that.
the biblical concept of yibum, and I don't even mean biblical. I mean sort of like when I say biblical, I mean in those days, not
Right, right.
not
I
biblical as
understand.
in
I
the
understand you.
Torah obligation.
No, no, I understand you.
So then it was a familiar thing, and that's what the Ramban is talking about there. The halacha of yibum most definitely only applies to brothers and does not apply to anyone else. And so that is certainly the case, and we would not in any way say in under the biblical the rabbinic understanding of what the biblical obligation of yibum is. We would not apply that to Yehuda and Tamar.
Well,
Notwithstanding anything the Ramban said, again, the Ramban was talking about what was the practice in the time of those communities. Okay, so as a result, Abaye says that maybe we do need to be worried about the fact that the husband has brothers. So Rav Yosef responds, "Hashda mias haleis nehu." Come on, look. At the very least, you can't say that they're in front of us. We don't have any of these witnesses in front of us. Lav hainu de Rabbi Chanina. Well, what about when Rabbi Chanina said, "The Amar Rabbi Chanina Edim b'tzad estan"? If there are witnesses in the Tzad Estan, which Rashbam understands means to the north, V'seyaser, and they say that the woman should be prohibited. This I'll tell you what the situation was where he made that statement, and Rashbam will tell us. Doesn't and we say Rabbi Chia said that Rabbi Kanina said, excuse me, that we're going to allow the woman to marry. Well, now what was that situation? Take a look in the Rashbam 5 lines into the medium wide lines of the Rashbam, Lav Hainu, Demakshinin and Biksuvos, because we asked in the case of in Ksuvos, Beperak Haisha Shenis Armula, in that chapter, Gabi Benatja Demar Shmuel. Shmuel had some daughters, the Ishtabian, that were taken captive. Askinuhu la'aradi Yisrael, and they were transferred over to the land of Israel. Va'amru, and they said when they escaped, Nishbesi, that they were held captive. The Tahora ani, but I am Tahor. Visharinu Rabbi Chanina, and Rabbi Chanina said that they were allowed to marry whomever they wanted, meaning even a Kohen, lehina seyak lekohanim, to marry Kohanim, even though they were potentially secluded with somebody that would cause them to be treated as a zona, even if it was against their will, and therefore would not be allowed to marry a Kohen. V'amrinan, and we said to Rabbi Chanina, we understand that there might be witnesses that say that they were made impure and therefore prohibited to Kohanim. V'amar Rabbi Chanina, and Rabbi Chanina said, Eidim b'tzad estan ruach tzefon, that there were witnesses they're considered in the north, ruach tzefonis, meaning in the northern direction. V'te'aser bitmia, and you're going to cause them to be prohibited, he asked. Umefarish Hasam, and we explain over there the Ede Tuma Itmar that he was referring to witnesses that said that they were Tame, and yet he basically questioned that even given the fact that they were not present, we were not going to treat them as treat these women as tame, and therefore we were going to allow them to marry a Kohen. So too here, when we have these witnesses that say that there maybe the man has brothers, but they're not here, and so we're going to allow these women to marry whomever they want and not have to go through Yibum.
Tell me, was that part of it? When he says Mufarish Hatam the Ade Tuma Itmar, is that part of the question?
No, that's explaining when it says that there were Adim b'Medinas Hayam. What were the witnesses going to say? Meaning it wasn't clear necessarily initially what the witnesses were going to say, and what Rashbam is saying is that we explain the situation over there as being witnesses of Tuma, and not about witnesses about just them being captives, because
Well,
that could be the issue as well.
so
So
aren't they saying that? Isn't it? Wait, then isn't he saying that if they were Ade Tuma, they would testify that she was Talmud?
yes, but they're not in front of us. And so we only, if there's only a rumor about there being these witnesses, it's not known for sure. If there were two witnesses that said that there were two witnesses, that would be a different situation. But all we have is a rumor that there are witnesses overseas that say that they're Tameh. And so
No,
as a result,
so, is he saying that? Is he saying when he says the Ede Tuma, is he referring to witnesses that saw her becoming Tame? Well, what?
Umafarish Hasam, right? And what are the alleged witnesses that exist somewhere else? We explain over there that those witnesses were Edi Tuma Itmar. They were talking about witnesses of Tuma. That's how I'm reading that, Rushbaum.
So
So the
then,
point is that despite the fact that there were witnesses of Tuma, they seem to be ignored. So Amrle Abai. So shouldn't the same situation be here, that we should ignore these witnesses because they're not here? So Amrle Abaye, Im hikalnu b'shvuya, just because you're going to be lenient by a captive, nakel be'eshes ish, you're going to also be lenient by a married woman. And Rashbam explains, Im hekilu b'shvuya, continuing on in the Rashbam. Now we're 4, 8, 10 lines down in the medium wide lines of the Rashbam. I guess they're the widest lines on this stuff. The harbe hikiluba chachamim b'meseches ksubas. There are lots of leniencies that the rabbis set up in Meseches Ksubos that we learned about in Meseches Ksubos when it comes to a captive. Dafil isha. That even a woman or a single witness is going to be believed. Lomar tahora, to say that these women are tahora. The taima, and the reason is the bishvilshnis yadda bain hashvain, because she is secluded among the captives. Ein lanu la'asra. We don't have a basis to say that she's prohibited. Sharei stam isha mishameres atzma miznus. Because a woman is going to do whatever she can to avoid engaging in illicit relations. V'ukma achaz kata. And so we want to keep her in her chazaka situation of her not having been violated. The Isser Kal, who. And also, this is a relatively modest prohibition, if she marries a Kohen, even if she were to have been violated. So now you're going to tell me
what does
Nakel
that mean
Be'eshes
then?
Ish.
So wait a
What?
minute,
Let me finish. Let's do the next Rashbam,
minor.
and then we'll ask the question. Now, Kelby Ishas, you're going to say that you should be lenient in connection with a married woman. Bitmiya, this is the Gemara is asking, or meaning Abaye is asking to Rav Yosef, Deika Isar Chenek. When it comes to an Ishas Ish, that is That is the punishment is strangulation. And she has a chazaka of being prohibited already, meaning her status was a married woman until the man died. And so as a result, her status is effectively a prohibited woman ad ata until now. But al tatirna misafik, and so we shouldn't allow a suffix to cause her to be permitted. Kaven de amre inshi de ika eta b'medinas hayam shezukuka liyabim, because there are witnesses. Supposedly, people are saying that there are witnesses overseas that say that she is connected to a yibum situation. So now I'll pause to take your question, and then we'll take a look at the Hagos Habach, who points something interesting out, because of course, at the moment after the husband dies, and if she has relations with somebody, it's not subject to chenek, it's not subject to strangulation, because she's able to marry, because it's only a lav prohibition that she can't marry somebody else before she does yibum or chalitza. So what's your question, Ken?
So how are we saying that was
Chazkata.
Achazatka ve'isur kalu im niseit
No, those
lemoed?
are two separate points. It's the ukma achazakta. We should
Okay, but so
therefore leave her in her situation
right.
of her kazaka,
So the question is, why is
namely
there an isur? Why is it an isur kal?
because it's only there's no death penalty involved. It's no death penalty. It's only lashes for her having violated the law of marrying somebody when she had a Zika relationship with somebody else. So that's the situation,
But
or
that's not
had
that's
marital relations with somebody else. Okay.
well, but she was a captive, right?
No, this is not. Yes, this is yes. I'm sorry. You're absolutely right. That correct. She was a captive, and so she didn't. The only she has not yet done anything wrong. Even if she were violated, she herself didn't do something wrong. Somebody did something wrong to her, but it just so turns out that she's now prohibited to marry a Kohen. But that prohibition of marrying a Kohen is only a lav and doesn't result in a penalty anywhere near like chenek of a strangulation, which is one of the arba mises based in.
Right. So she is right. So that's why it's there's an issue. She's not only cannot marry a Cohen, she has to leave her husband.
Yes, she would have. She's obligated to leave her husband, but the point is that the relations that she would have with her husband are only a Zika relationship. I'm sorry, excuse me, are
Oh,
only a lav.
right. Okay.
It's not
That's
a death penalty situation. So that's why
it's
we
an
can
issue.
allow her to stay with him, because even if the witnesses were to come and it turns out that they need to divorce, so fine. So she did something that was wrong, but it wasn't such a big
Right.
penalty,
Okay. All
a
right.
big
All
sin.
right. All
But
right.
the
All right.
Bach asks 1 second, the violation, the prohibition of marrying somebody who's subject to a Zika is the same level of lav as it is a Kohen to marry a Zona. So why, how can you say that one is more severe? So take a look at the letter Vav in the Hagos Habach. So nakel ba'eshes ish v'chulu iser chanek. So nichta b'tzi. This the afal gaf the achshav ena eshes ish. Even though now, after the husband dies, she's no longer a married woman. V'leika chenek, and now the punishment won't be chenek. Ki'im lav. It's only a lav. Delo tiyeh eshes hames hachutza, that the wife of the deceased is not allowed to marry anyone she wants because she's subject to the obligations of Yibum or Chalitza. Mikom Makam, nonetheless, Me'achar Dekodem Shemes Bala Haisa Becheskas Eshes Ish, because before her husband died, she was subject to the Eshes Ish penalty, unlike the daughters of Shmuel who were captives and they were not subject to any penalties because they were not married. Adayin b'chezkas oso iser. So as a result, the Bach is saying that she remains subject to the same prohibition, omedes. V'zeu iser chenek. It's even though it's a prohibition of chenek, even though lo chenek mamish, but it's not going to get strangulation itself. Rak iser chenek. It's just a prohibition that was at one time subject to chenek. Shahaya ba lo nistalek mimena ad sheniftara mizikas yavama, and that won't leave her until she has exempted herself from the connection with her yivama. So that is the Bach, and so as a result, that's explaining why, in fact, Abaye's question is an excellent question. That we shouldn't be any more lenient. We should be less lenient. Just because we're lenient in connection with a captive woman doesn't necessarily mean that we'll be lenient with a married woman. And in the end, Rava agrees. So Amrle Rava Rav
So she's
Nasan Bar
like
Ami
she's like
Kushla.
she's
And so
married.
let me finish. You please don't interrupt. And so as a result, Rava responds to Rav Nasan Bar Ami and says, in fact, Abaye is right. We do need to be worried. And so as a result, notwithstanding the fact that we had a chazaka that this man had no brothers, and at his deathbed, he says he has no brothers. The fact that we hear a rumor that there may be witnesses that he has brothers is enough to cause the woman to not be able to marry whomever she wants at this moment. And we need to actually explore what the uncertainty is and to determine, in fact, whether or not there are these witnesses, in fact, out there. Go ahead, Ken, please.
But I think we've learned elsewhere that she's because she is zakukli yibum. She's like she's married. She's not her, even though her husband is dead now. She's tied to him to the brother in such a way that she's like she's married. So that she may. So that's why I would think the chinuch prohibition would apply.
So the answer to that question is most definitely she does not get chenek if she has relations with some third party. Most definitely, it is not a death penalty case. She does not get chenek even if she has a Zika relationship, even though you are correct that on some level we treat that Zika relationship like they're married, like they're connected. So you're right on that, but the penalty is not, and that's what the Bach is trying to say. So you're effectively agreeing with what the Bach is trying to say. And sorry for not scrolling. You're agreeing with that concept, which is that in fact we're going to say that that this is a situation where where the penalty that had existed at one time and the prohibition that existed at one time, even though the penalty is now different, we're viewing it all as if it's still the same kind of penalty. She's almost like an Eshes Ish. That's effectively what the Hagosa Bach is saying. So you're right on that. Okay. So now the Mishnah that we learned yesterday noted that we said that if the I say that these people are my brothers, I'm not believed. And yet if I cause the if we take an inheritance and the person that I say is my brother gets my share, but not a share from all the other brothers. And if at the end of the day that brother passes away and has received another inheritance, I have to share that with my other brothers, with the people who everybody knows are my brothers. So the Gemara is now asking, what's the story there? So Ze'achi Eino Neman, he's not believed. So Ve'idach my kamri, what are the other brothers saying? If they say that they're his brother, and meaning everybody agrees that the brother, why does that brother, again, our situation that we came up with yesterday was I say that Stan is my brother, and Mark is around and doesn't say anything, and so now that we have an inheritance of 3 plots of land, I have to give him half a plot, and I get 1 plot, and Mark gets 1.5 plots. That's what we said was the case in the Mishnah. So, but why, if Mark is agreeing that he's the brother, why doesn't Mark have to give his portion also so that Stan would get a full 1/3? Ela de Ka'amri Lavachinahu. So it must be Mark is saying that he's not the brother. But when second, Ema Seifa, then what about the end of the Mishnah? Naflu lo nechasim makom acher. If Stan were to inherit something from some other source, and Admeya ve'esrim, he should live and be well, but after that point, when he passes away, so Yershu echavimo. But we said that Mark and I would share that inheritance. So how can that work out? That doesn't make any sense. Ha'amrile lavachuna. Mark had said that he's not his brother. So as a result, if he's not his brother, well, then he shouldn't take any inheritance. So lo tzricha de ka'amri ein anu yodim. So we have to say that the case in our Mishnah is where the other brothers say, we have no idea. And so as a result, this is a good advice, by the way. If in fact you don't know, you should say, I don't know, because then you get the benefit of both sides. You don't have to share your inheritance. And if in fact you were to get an inheritance from that brother, you'd get to share in that inheritance. Okay. So Amarava Zozomeris, doesn't this show Manali v'yadcha? If I say to Stan, you owe me $100. Vahala Omer, and Stan replies, Aini Yodea, I don't know whether I owe you $100. Putter. Stan is not liable. After all, these brothers, right? The brothers in this case said they have no idea whether or not Stan is their brother. Mark said he has no idea whether Stan is his brother. And Mark didn't have to share any of his estate. Right. Even though Stan was like, presumably, at this moment, we assume Stan was saying, yeah, I'm their brother. So so doesn't that show? So Abaye says, 1 second, it does not. It does not necessarily prove anything. La'olam emalach chayiv. Maybe I could say that actually, if I say that you're obligated, if I say that you're I could tell you that in that case, when I claim the $100 and Stan is unsure, he does have to pay me the shiny hacha. And this case is different. That the case is really a third party. Ken is telling Stan that he owes me $100, and both Stan and I are actually unsure. Now, what that is telling us is the following. Take a look at the top Rashbam on Kuf Lamed Hey Amabet. La'olam chayiv debari v'shema bari adiv. That really, if I'm certain that Stan owes me and Stan's uncertain, we say that a certain claim versus an uncertain claim, the certain claim wins. The shiny hacha. And here it's different. Why is it different? It's different because oh, you know what I should do? We could go back and do a hold on. Okay. And the shiny haka, and this case is different. The hasafik atzmo, the alleged brother himself, enu yodeya, he doesn't know. Ve'enu yachol liton ta'anas dvadai. He's unable to make a certain claim. So when Stan tries to get the half field from Mark, it's the suffix who. It's a suffix and a suffix. V'hilkach oki mamona becheskas mari, and therefore we leave the money where it is. Aval ha'ach toin b'shvil ha'suffix. But what is happening really? I'm making the claim on Stan's behalf against Mark. Mana la'achi biyadchem, right? That I'm claiming to Mark that Stan is owed $100. Hilkach amrile lav bal dvarim didanat. And Mark can claim back, you are not our litigant. And as a result, I don't have to do anything for Stan. So I will pause and let's take a look back at the last Rashbam on Kuf Lamed Hey Amabet. On Amud Aleph, excuse me, because that will tell us the source of this machlokas, and the Rashbam will tell us what he believes the halacha is.
I don't think that was clear.
What
you explained before in the Rashbam, we went to. I something wasn't clear. The disputed brother says he's not a brother, or he doesn't know.
The disputed brother says he doesn't know.
So what? So then if one of the other two brothers, what is the benefit? What is the gain for one of the other two brothers to say, he's my brother, he's our brother? Why
He's
would he do
telling the
that?
truth.
No,
One is he's telling the truth.
but if the disputed individual says, I'm not your brother, I don't know if I'm your brother, then why should someone else be willing to forsake some of his inheritance or his money or money, whatever the deal is, for someone who himself doesn't know that he's a brother?
Yeah, because maybe this person is an infant, and because the father had a child at a much later stage, and the infant has no idea because he's 3 years old. I mean, there are a lot of situations we can, once we're trying to explain why, it's not hard to come up with reasons. But that's the situation. That's what Rashbam is explaining. Abaye is qualifying our situation. We're no longer talking about where Stan was making a certain claim. We're talking about a situation where Stan doesn't know the answer to the question, and only I am the one who's testifying that Stan is in fact our brother. The other thing I can note, if you need it to be sort of like a true incentive situation, maybe Stan's very wealthy. And so as a result, especially if it's true, I want everybody to know that I'm Stan's brother, because this way, if Stan doesn't have heirs, so then I get to inherit him. And so that would be a wonderful thing. So that would be a reason that I might want to say it, even though right now I have to share this inheritance that I'm getting from my through my ancestry. Even though I might be sharing that, now there may be a further upside, because again, I would get to inherit Stan, assuming that he has no children. Okay, so but let's take a look now at the Rashbam on the bottom of Kuf Lamed Hayam and Aleph. Zosomeris. So Rashbam reminds us of where we've seen this machlokes, where I have a bari and a shema, where one person is saying, you definitely owe me money, and the other person says, I have no idea. Uplugsa he bekama makomos in Gemara. This is a machlokes that are in several places in the Gemara, and the parentheses notes babakama daf kuf yud chet. De Rav Huna of Rav Yehuda Amri Chayiv. Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda say that the person is obligated, that Stan, when he doesn't know, is obligated because of the concept of Bari V'Shema, Bari Adif, that the certain person wins. Rav Nachman, Rav Yochanan, Amri Potter. But Rav Nachman and Rav Yochanan say that actually you're not obligated. The Kaimelan, and in fact, we say that the halacha is the Potter. You are exempt. That we have two general principles, and both of them lean in that direction of saying that you're not obligated. We hold like Rabbi Yochanan whenever he argues with his friends and with his colleagues, and Rav Nachman, we hold like him when it comes to monetary matters. Ella sheyishba shvuas heses, but we make you swear a rabbinic oath, meaning that Stan would need to swear she'enu yodea, that in fact he does not know. Umas nisan nami ha'ach, and so in our Mishnah as well, ha'ach echad toen b'shvil echav. One brother is making a claim on behalf of his other brother, so I'm making the claim on behalf of Stan, hasafik, the uncertain one, meaning the alleged brother. Mammon, of money. Mammon yesh la'achi biyadchem, right? My brother Stan, I'm saying to Mark, has money in your hand. Vehain omrim, and then Mark says back, Ein anu yodim. We don't know whether Stan is our brother. V'amrinan, and yet we say in our Mishnah, Peturin, that Mark is exempt from sharing the estate. To Oki Mamona Becheskas Murray, that we leave the money where it is. And so as a result, doesn't this show? This is Rabba's question. And we answered, no, it doesn't show, because maybe when I claim on behalf of Stan, but Stan himself is uncertain, we won't give any extra credit to my certainty. And so that is how we end. And again, The point is that we hold, like Rav Nachman and Rabbi Yochanan, that in fact Bari v'Shema, the Shema wins with an oath. Mace yachsaru nechasim l'makoman. Now, if in fact the alleged brother were to die, then the money returns to its place. But if the alleged brother gets an inheritance from elsewhere, well, then that inheritance gets shared among all the brothers. Meaning, I had to share my piece with Stan, so if anything happens to Stan, I get my piece back. But the Gemara asks by Rava asks, Sheva shvach sheshavcho nechasim alehen mahu. What happens about improvements in the land that I gave Stan? So b'shevach hamagia l'ksefayim, when you have produce, meaning stuff that's reached your shoulders, meaning the produce is ready for harvest. Slow tibailach. Nobody's asking about that. Because if we take a look at the Rashbam, why is nobody asking that? Because should take a look at the last of the Y lines at the top of the Rashbam. Shinasan zelusafek karka rekanit. Right, I gave to Stan empty fields. The tarachba, and he worked them. Zeasafik, the uncertain brother. Lecharush v'lizroa, to thresh, to plow them, and to plant them, and to sow them. V'harehi ata kishachozeres lo lenosein Malaya Pteros. And so now, because of the work that Stan did, when they're coming back to me, they're filled with fruit. Loti bailach. In that situation, it's clear. I'm not asking about that. All the other brothers get to benefit from this benefit. Right? This is just like an inheritance coming to Stan from some other location. Dummy. Daha lo karina bay yachsaru nechasim l'makoman. You can't call that returning it to its place. Shahare lo nasan lo peros. I didn't give him a field with fruit on it. Elakarka rekanid. I gave him an empty field. So it's only the empty field that I should get back. Okay. So Kiti Bailach, back in the Gemara, where am I going to ask you this question? Last of the, end of the fifth line of the Gemara at the top of Kuf Lamed Hey Amid Aleph, B'Shevach She'eno Megilik Sefaim. When we're talking about other kinds of improvements, Kgon Dikla V'Alim, like you had a dekel tree and it got stronger. Ara V'Aska Sirton, or you have land and a sirton, sediment came to it. Take a look at the Rashbam. Why is sediment coming to it a good thing? Aska sirtun me'atzma. First of all, it had to have come by itself. If Stan actually did the work to bring it there, well, then it would be a different story. Then it would be something that came essentially from another place, and as a result, I would have to share it. But here, the sediment came on its own. And now, Shalo Zivla Hasafik. Now Stan doesn't need to fertilize the land any further. Below Tarach B'chach. And he didn't do any work for this. So what's the halacha? Teku. In that situation, it's uncertain. So we would say Hamotzi Mechavero Olav Haraya. So it's an interesting question of what's the story when it's still in Stan's hands? Yeah. Who gets it? But all right, so that we're not. This is not a halachic shir, so we're not going to go into the detail. But that's the again an interesting question of how we deal with hamotzi mechaver or of a raya in this kind of situation when it's effectively in a third party's hands. Okay.
The Bari v'Shema, if you have a machlok, but and the Bari takes an oath, would he be entitled to it?
Well, since we don't give the Bari the right to an oath. Now, sometimes we do give the claimant the right to swear and take. And indeed, my understanding is that there are some who say that maybe you can swear and take. But here we're saying that you swear and don't take. And so as a result, we're going to
no, we're saying the Shema is swearing.
The Shema swears and avoids having to pay, and so as a result, I don't think we would allow the other person to swear and take. We don't just you have to have an affirmative allowance for that. It's not as if now, of course, if Stan were to say, you know what, I'll let you, I'm not sure, but if you swear, I'll give it to you. We saw just a few days ago, maybe it was last week at this point, that in fact Stan's allowed to do that. And once I make an oath, he's not allowed to retract from it. So you're absolutely right to raise that because that is, in fact, something that could potentially happen. Okay, so now the Gemara talks about what happens, how we transfer property, and this is going to get to the question that you asked earlier today, Ken, about whether or not a gift is considered given at the moment or is only takes effect upon the death. So Misha Mace, if somebody dies, the nimtses diatiki shura al yerecho, and that you find a diatiki. Now, what is a diatiki? We're going to define it in the Gemara, but for the moment, well, but let's take a look in the Rashbam. Shtar tzivat shchivmera. It is a contract, a written document that details the commands and requests of somebody who is on their deathbed. Kedidarish le b'Gemara, as we will note in the Gemara, da tehei lemekim luliyot, that it's effectively an acronym, not truly an acronym because it's not always the first letter, but it's sort of like a contraction of this should be established and become true. So we'll see exactly that in the Gemara, but let's take a look. So if in fact you find this diatiki, kshura al yerecho, attached to the thigh of the deceased, harezu eina klum, it's nothing. And the reason that it's nothing is because a contract, a document itself doesn't do anything to transfer property that is movable property. And that's what we're going to be saying that we're talking about here, not immovable property, not real estate. If it was real estate, then a contract can transfer real estate, but a contract does not transfer movable property. And so as a result, that is not going to work. Zika bala acher. However, if in fact he gave the property to somebody else by giving the document to somebody else, bein min hayorshin, bein she'ena min hayorshin, whether the beneficiary is actually somebody who's supposed to take an inheritance or not, dvarav kayamim, then a recipient actually gets the property, and take a look at the Rashbam, end of the Rashbam, last Rashbam on the Mishnah, Devarav Kayamin, Avagav de Ein Roy Liyorsho, even though this person may not be an heir and therefore not appropriate to inherit, Kani La'achar Misa, he makes the acquisition after the person has died, below Kinyan, even without a Kinyan. Divrei shchivmera, because the words of somebody on their deathbed, kiksuvin ukemisurin damu, are like they are written and transferred. And the point is that they're written and transferred because written alone is not enough, as we saw at the beginning of this Mishnah. If they're written and they're still with the deceased, that isn't enough. But if he just says something, that is enough to make it clear that he wants this to in fact happen. Now the Gemara is going to detail exactly how this works. So let's take a look. So Tana Rabbanan.
We're saying verbal is stronger than written?
Verbal is, yes, we're going to see that verbal is actually turns out to be stronger than written in one characteristic. Now we're going to end up saying that you have to, when you have written, you have to understand better what precisely are the circumstances. But let's take a look, and that's exactly what the Gemara is going to explore. So let's keep that question in the back of our mind as we go through this. So what is Ezuhi Diatiki? So what is this Diatiki? Meaning, Rashbam explains, first Rashbam in the Gemara, Ezehi matana shchivmira shegova la'achar misa apagat lo kasaba mehayom. What is this document that allows somebody to receive a gift after the death of the decedent, even though he did not say that the gift is from today, meaning from while he was still alive? Kol shekasuv ba da tehei lemekem v'liyot. that anything where it's written, this should be valid and enduring. The ezehi matana, and what is considered a gift? When it says in writing from today and after death. And so this is the answer to your question, Ken. The question is, how was the transfer made to the wife? If the transfer was made to the wife with a diatuke, then maybe, in fact, it's not going to be valid if he then divorces her. It's not clear. But clearly, if in fact it's a gift of Mehayom Alach or Misa, well, then certainly it would be valid because it's given to her at that moment. And so anything that he does later doesn't have the ability to undo it. And we are going to see more of that in a moment, that you can undo one diatiki with another diatiki. Okay, Ela Mehayom Alach or Misa hu dehavya matana. Me'achshav lo havya matana. 1 second. Are you telling me that you can only give a gift from now and after death? Now, by the way, from now and after death, what does that mean? Let's take a look in the Rashbam. The Ezehi Matana Bari Shetakanas Kol Shekasu Ba Mehayom. Demashma Haki Gufa Kanoi Lach Mehayom. That the object itself, this is the third to last line, so now we're on the second to last line of the narrow lines in the Rashbam, that the item itself is given to you immediately. Upere, but I get the benefit for now until after I die. Uperi la'akar but you only get the fruit after the death. Aval I lo hava kasav ba mayom. But if in fact, if I were to try to give something and say that you only get it after my death, aino kona, then there would be no kinyan whatsoever. De'ain matana la'achar misa. There is no such thing as a gift after death. Sharei ein koach la'adam litain mikodem la'kain davar shalo yochel la'haknos ba'otos man. You're unable to transfer something in a future time at a now when you wouldn't be able to make that transfer at that future time. Shehu rotza lehit shetit kayem. When you want it to take effect, if you couldn't give it at that time, then it doesn't work. Hamatana. The gift doesn't work. V'achar misa heich yachol adam litain acharei shemes v'nikvar. How does anybody give something after they're dead and buried? So that's the issue. So that's the story. So now the back into the Gemara. Ella. A third line down from where it says Gemara. Ella ma'ayom ulachar misa hu dahavya matana me'akshav lo havya matana. 1 second. You said what is the matana? What's considered a gift? And you referenced from today and after death. Doesn't that suggest that if I were to only say from today, it wouldn't be a gift? Of course, that's a gift. So Amar Abaye Hachikamer. This is what we're trying to say. Ezehi matana bari shehi kamatana shchivmara. What is the kind of gift that is like the gift of a deathbed person, meaning a person who's very ill? Because a matana of a deathbed person only takes effect when they die. It's assumed to mean that the gift is conditional on their death. Because in the deathbed, when a person gives a gift on their deathbed, they only acquire it effectively after the death. So what is that? That's kol shekasam mehayom alachar misa. So if you want to transfer something today in a way that the person recipient only gets it after you die, you say mehayom ulachar misa. Okay, so that is the background. So now a story. Yosef Rabba bar Rav Huna ba'achsadrab debei Rav v'Yosef ka'amar mishmei de Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabba bar Rav Huna was sitting in the yeshiva of Rav in the pavilion, and he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Shchiv mira sha'amar. If somebody's on their deathbed and they say, Shkisvu utnu mana leploni, write down and give $100, 100 zuz to Ploni, to this person. In Kosvin Venosin, and now the guy dies before anything is done, meaning before it's been written, before it's been given. Well, then we don't write it and we don't give it. Why? Because Shemelo Gomer Lahaknoso Ela Bishtar. Maybe his intention, maybe the decedent's intention was only to give the gift through a document. that he wasn't trying to give the recipient extra power. He was trying to limit the nature of the gift. He was not trying to make a gift of a deathbed. Because if you want to make a deathbed gift, this is just so that everybody should know, the way to do it is to just say, give money to this person, and then you will have given the deathbed gift. You don't need a reference writing anything down. There's no need. And so as a result, when you add writing something down, now it sounds like you're trying to do something less than give a deathbed gift. Ve'ein shtar la'achar misa. And as we saw earlier, there's no kinds of contract that take effect after death. So Amar Lahu Rabbi Elazar is daharuba. You should be very careful. Meaning, the Rashbam explains 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines down in the widest lines of the Rashbam. Shekain halacha. Rabbi Elazar is saying that this is in fact the halacha. Rav Shizvi Amar. Rav Shizvi says, by the way, this statement really happened the other way. Rabbi Elazar Amara, v'Amar Lahu Rabbi Yochanan is daruba. It was Rabbi Elazar who made this statement and saying all the words of that the person who's seriously ill says, I write down and give $100 to X. And so as a result, we say that we don't do so. Oops, I'm sorry for not scrolling. And so as a result, that's the situation where we're going to give that's the situation that actually happened. And it was Rabbi Yochanan who said that we need to be careful about it, meaning that that's the halacha. Now, Amar of Nachman Bar Yitzchak, Kivasek de Rav Shizvi Mistabra. Actually, it makes more sense to say that let me scroll my screen. It makes more sense to say that what Rav Shizvi said, that version of it, meaning that Rabbi Elazar was the one who made the statement, and Rabbi Yochanan was the one who said that you should be careful about it, that makes more sense. Because Amrad, Bishlama, Rabbi Elazar Amra, if in fact it was Rabbi Elazar who made the statement, Israch Rabbi Yochanan, La'asuhude alei de Rabbi Elazar. It makes sense for Rabbi Yochanan to testify that Rabbi Elazar is correct because Rabbi Yochanan was Rabbi Elazar's teacher. Ela'i Amrat Rabbi Yochanan Amra. But if you say that it was Rabbi Yochanan who said it, Israch Rabbi Elazar la'asude alei de Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi. Did Rabbi Elazar need to tell us that the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan and his teacher? That's like a student saying the halacha in front of his teacher. That's not necessary and not appropriate. V'od tashma de Rabbi Elazar Amra. Moreover, I can show you that it was Rabbi Elazar who said it because we actually have a different tradition. And in the end of this tradition, it was not Rabbi Yochanan saying, be vigilant. It was Rabbi Yochanan saying something different. And we're going to see what it was in a moment. Teshalach Rabban Mishmei de Rabbi Abahu Havu Yodin Sheshalach Rabbi Elazar Legola Mishum Rabbeinu. That in fact, Rabban sent in the name of Rabbi Abahu, that we should know that Rabbi Elazar sent to the diaspora, he sent in the name of Rabbeinu. And who is Rabbeinu? Rabbeinu is Rav, according to the Rashbam. 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 lines down, 9 lines down in the Rashbam, in the middle of the line. And Shchiv Meira, what did he send? Shchiv Meira Sha'amar Kisvu Tanu Mana Laploni. If the person on the deathbed says, write a document and give the $100 to X, Umes, and he dies before anything happened, Ein Kosvim Venosin. We don't actually write and give it. Shema lo gamar lahaktos eler b'shtar, because maybe his intention was only to do it with a document. Ve'ein shtar la'achar misa, and that document won't work after the person has died. Meaning, obviously, if the person, we'll get to that in a moment. But Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Tibadek, but Rabbi Yochanan says, check it out. What does he mean by check it out? My Tibadek. What does he mean by check it out? So, Kiyasa Rav Dimi, Amar, when Rav Dimi came, he had 2 rulings. Now, Rashbam explains that the first of these rulings has nothing to do with us, and it's the second of the rulings that are going to be key. What is the first ruling? Well, this is the ruling that I hinted to before, diyatiki mivatelas diyatiki, meaning in the case that Ken asked about, where a wife receives an inheritance, if in fact it was done through a diyatiki, and then the husband divorces the wife, and so he writes a new diatiki that undermines the previous diatiki. Well, then that in fact the original one to the wife will be undermined and can be negated, because the diatiki is just effectively an well, let's take a look in the Rashbam. Diatiki mivatela diatiki. It's 1, 2, 3. We're from the bottom of the Rashbam. It's 10 lines up. Shchiv Meira, somebody on their deathbed, Shekasav Nechasav Le'echad, who writes that their possessions should go to one person, V'chazav V'kasav La'achar, and then writes that it should go to somebody else. Sheni Kana Rishon Lo Kana. The second gets it, the first one doesn't get it. Sharei Shchiv Meira Yachol Lachzor B'Manatanaso, because a person on their deathbed has the right to undo the gift until they die. As we say in the next chapter of this Maseches. And once he writes it to somebody else, clearly he intends to undo it from the first person. So we'll stop there in that Rashbam, back into the Gemara. But now we get to the more important lesson. If somebody says that they should, on their deathbed, that somebody should write and deliver a mana to somebody, umes, and the person dies, rowan. What do? We examine. We take a look. What are we going to take a look at? And this is what is meant by my tibadeg. Im kemiyapa et koko, if in fact the person is trying to strengthen the hand of the beneficiary, well then kosvin. Well then what he really meant is, I'm giving you an oral gift, and please write down the fact that I gave it to you, because I want you to have extra evidence of the fact that I made this gift to you. The imlav, but if in fact he didn't mean that, ain kotvin, well then you don't write it. And so how do I make that determination? That's what the next Gemara is going to say. So Masav Rabbi Abba Bar Mamil, Rabbi Abba Bar Mamil challenged this. Barisha Amr Kisva Utsnu Mana Laploni Umes Ain Kosvin Unosnin Hashchiv Meira. 1 second. When it comes to a healthy person, we say that you don't write it down. We don't write it down if the person asks for it to be given, and we don't deliver it if they die first. But that implies that when it comes to a shchiv meira, somebody who is seriously ill and on their deathbed, we would write it down. So who mosivla, who mufarikla. He asked the question and he answered it. B'miyafa et koko. The situation where you're going to write it down for a shiv meira is when it's clear that the person is trying to enhance the power of the beneficiary. And hechi damim miyapet koko, where is that situation? Kida amar Rav Chisda. It's like where Rav Chisda said, and Taba Kuf Lamed Bava Mid Aleph, the kanina mine mosif al matan talda, that where the person says, I'm doing this transaction, and as a result, it's sort of like another situation where Rav Chisda said elsewhere, where if the witnesses say we effected an acquisition in addition to his oral statement of a gift. So Hachanami here too, the Amar Aksovo v'chasamo v'havule, where the point is where the person doesn't just say write and give, but he's saying also write and give, meaning I also want you to write in addition to giving, meaning I want you to therefore write and sign and give to him the document in addition to giving to him the gift, because in that situation it's clear. Itmar, and we say about this, Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, halacha kosvin v'nosnin. We write it and we give it. V'chein Amar Rava Amar Rav Nachman, halacha kosvin v'nosnin. We write it and we give it. So what we end up with is, even though we had said earlier that if a person on the deathbed said write and give $100 to X, we said, and nothing happened before the person died, nothing happens. That is true unless we know, as Rabbi Yochanan testified, as Rabbi Yochanan said, if in fact we do an investigation and it turns out that the person on their deathbed said, by the way, the reason that I'm having you do this writing is in order to strengthen the hand of the recipient of my gift, well, then you're going to write in addition to the giving. And even if the person has passed away, we fulfill the wishes of that deathbed wish, because that deathbed oral gift is a valid gift after the person has died. And it's in that one situation where a person can actually transfer something after they die, even before, even though when you're healthy, you have no ability to make such a transfer. And so with that, well, that brings us to the next Mishnah, which discusses how a healthy person can transfer assets after his death. And again, that will be, again, a situation that we've been touching on of Mihayom Ula'achar Misa. We'll see that, God willing, tomorrow. Looking forward to
So if
continuing.
the healthy person says, "Today I'm giving you a gift," it's not valid unless he writes it down.
No, no, you can do the gift today. You can't make it effective only after your death. You cannot make a gift and say, I'm giving this to you for the day after I die. You
But
have to transfer a piece of it today. If you don't transfer the underlying asset today and just retain for yourself the fruit of the asset, then it's not going to be a valid transfer. And that's what
but
we're going to see, God willing, tomorrow.
you retain the fruit, but you have to give the whole gift today.
You have to give absolutely. You have to give the underlying asset to somebody. And the question, interesting question, is and we haven't gotten to it, is whether how this works for metaltalin. Does it also work for metaltalin? Does it only work for karka? But the bottom line is that the underlying object needs to be owned by the recipient today. If I'm a healthy person trying to give something away for after I die,
But the fruits he can retain, right?
I can retain the fruit. But once I've given it to you, then unlike with the deathbed gift, I don't have any ability to undo it. I've given it to you. You own the underlying asset. I can't undo that.
Right, the underlying asset, but the fruits he could still keep, right?
Yes, the
In the
fruit I would
meantime,
still be able to keep
and then he could say the fruits are yours after his death, right?
after the person's death. Exactly. All right, like I said, we're gonna see exactly this case, God willing, tomorrow. All right, have a wonderful day, everybody.